Hey
What's going
everybody,
on?
we are back
Yeah.
again. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back to another episode of Salt and Light.
Heartedness.
We are your two guests, Jolene and Esther, and we are just elated that you click that button to come on and listen to everything that we have to say and join us once again. We don't take it for granted. And we're really excited and hope that you'll be able to receive a lot from today's episode. So the last episode we spoke about, what did we speak about?
Actually, I ain't gonna hold you.
Why?
Let's see what we were actually talking about.
What did we speak about? Hold on. I thought I remembered that. Oh yes, watch your mouth.
You see, we doing too good a job about watching our mouths because we didn't remember what we were talking about. Yes, that episode was so good. Yes.
Listen. If you haven't watched that episode, you need to go back and watch it as soon as possible. It's life changing. Okay, it's life changing. And we just spoke briefly about the importance of watching the words that come out of your mouth, watching what you're decreeing over yourself, speaking positively, even in circumstances that aren't that positive, and just the importance of just speaking well and speaking the word over your life. So once again, if you haven't watched it, you need to go watch it. It's going to be the game changer. Yes. So today, we got to talk about it. We got to talk about it. We do. It's an important aspect of life. And, today we are talking about navigating the depths of grief.
Yeah.
So we can call it good grief because we're going to talk about the good aspects of grief.
That's good.
There is good. There is good there.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel good, but there is
for
good.
sure. For
There's
sure.
Good there. Yeah. So where do we want to start this at? Let's see. Let's start that, grief definitely comes in different forms, shapes. Grief is not only just dealing with, the passing transition of a loved one. It can show up in other ways, such as, grief of a different season or a season that you expected to happen and it didn't happen. Grief of a friendship or a relationship that didn't work out, or grief of just even a dream that hasn't been fulfilled. And I think even living through, world events like what we just experienced in 2020, I feel like as a collective, a lot of us in the world were experiencing a level of grief of the plans that we had for 2020. I know myself, I was in, 2020 started. I was like, new year, new me. This is my season. I must see all this. Right. I remember in January of 2020, I was like, this year feels different. I was like, oh yeah.
It was. It was different. And that was not the different you was talking about.
It was different. Right. Oh, it was very different. And there were highlights of 2020 for me. And then there were some very low points of 2020 for me. Definitely the isolation was horrible. And just the idea that all these great dreams and aspirations and plans that I had made for myself for 2020 did not happen. could not happen because everything was
Yeah.
shut down, you know, coming to grips with that and, releasing what I had hoped to be, well, I went through a little bit of grief there. Definitely,
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're
definitely.
being for real as it relates to the pandemic, right? Everyone went through some level of grief there, right? Like even if you don't know how to express it or like couldn't put your finger on it, but like it felt off. And then obviously some people went through tremendous levels of grief through that because they've lost family, multiple family, all the family, and just jobs, opportunities, you know. There was
Yeah,
definitely a lot there to grieve, right? And then even back
yeah,
on this side of things, this is not the world that we knew, right? So grieving even that.
mm-mm,
Um, but I think that there's so many different levels and layers to grieving, but we're mostly taught about the one where we lose our loved ones. And obviously that's nothing to sneeze
yeah,
at all.
right.
That is that grief can last.
Woo!
And I guess maybe we should jump into, I don't know, maybe we should talk a little bit about grieving people for a second, right? I'll start.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and I'll start
mhm,
because I'm currently like have been reminded of a person that I am yet grieving, even, oh my goodness, almost 3 years later,
yeah,
right? And so
yeah,
losing
yeah,
a sister is something obviously you don't anticipate until you are old and gray and you have lived all the life, and having someone losing someone suddenly, right, it's traumatic. It's
yeah, very much so.
you really and I was talking to my therapist about this actually. I was like, I think I haven't fully wrapped my brain around that yet, right? Like obviously I know it happened.
Right,
I very clearly know that that's transpired, but just missing my friend, right? And that
yeah,
we were friends since we were probably like 11 or 12, right? And so going into what would have been 40 or would be 40 for me next month, sometimes I'm just like, the wind blows and I'm like, so- sometimes
right. It's that
listen,
wave.
sometimes I look at the kids and I'm like
Yeah,
grieving the loss of their mom, right? Sometimes, it's just,
yeah,
it's multi-layered. Just the nature of our relationship was very lighthearted, right? Like, obviously we
yes,
had
very much so.
moments where we were serious, and we could bare our souls, but it always ended up in a joking situation or laughing about something stupid and be like, all right, get your life together because like we don't have time for this. Like, let's just laugh. And so, sometimes I miss just that, right? Like and she was always up early too.
Yeah,
So I would be like, something stupid was going on. I just text her and she'd be like, all right, man. So, we kind of just joke about whatever, and it just kind of brighten my day. And, sometimes I
uh-huh,
just think about her and it's like overwhelmingly like I just can't even find the words. I and she's not the
yeah.
first person, but I ain't trying to be on waterworks here. So, I will say that losing
Ooh,
people suddenly also taught me how exactly people get stuck in grief. I will never forget
yeah,
when Al passed. We were together, me, you, and Sharice was there, and
we
we were
were
gonna go
very
hang
much
out. We were doing crafts or
together.
something, and I got that call, and it was
Yes.
like, what? Like I couldn't honestly. I don't know how I got home. I vaguely remember how I got home, but
I drove
it
you
had to
home.
be because Sharice don't even drive. So it was like a whirlwind, and you're like this person I was just talking to earlier
Mhm.
in the day is not here. And that one, actually, Al's passing taught me a lot, right? Because to date, I have been very blessed in my life to not have lost young people, right? Everyone for me who had passed on had been
Mhm.
a senior, and I mean like a real senior, like in their like
Yeah.
80s plus, and so
They
yeah,
live,
yes, and so
right.
they had lived long, full lives, and so yeah, like what? You know what I mean? Like hearing that and then navigating that, and I remember that was I would the wind could
Mm.
literally blow and I would be like a wreck. And I remember that I was just like, God, I don't know about this. I don't know what to do. I
Right.
don't know. I don't know. I just don't know. And but I do
Yeah, 'cause it just didn't make
it didn't.
sense.
And
It
I
didn't
mean,
make sense.
honestly, I'm kind of strange because I didn't ask why. Like I'm not one of those people. And I'm not believe me
Right.
and hear me very clearly. There is no problem with asking God why, right? You may get an answer, you may
Yeah.
not. Ultimately, God gave told me the answer. I was just sitting with myself and my thoughts, and he told me exactly what happened. And it later down the
Mhm.
line, I found that what he told me was exactly what happened. And but I remember one day I was just in my bed just crying because I was like, I really just was experiencing depression, right? Because I'm like, this is somebody I talk to every day. It's my
Mhm.
bestie.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like, like, friends with my brothers or my
Yeah.
family know him. It's like, what are we even talking about? And so I
Right.
remember I was just in the room and
Right.
I was like, God, you're gonna have to give me the peace that passes all understanding. And when I tell you that that is what got me through, right? And just celebrating the good times, the laughs that we had, because, we were always
Right.
laughing and always joking and always playing, and then when I felt those waves of sadness, I just cried. I journaled, like allow yourself to
Yeah.
feel the grief, right? And
Allow
I think
yourself. Yes.
that's a
That's
big
big.
thing, right? And at the time, I didn't do grief counseling. Matter of fact, in no situation have I done grief counseling, right? Um, but I thank God
Mhm.
that He's the counselor, and I'm not opposed to counseling. Just so we're clear, I think that it's a great tool, and I think grief
Yeah.
counseling is wonderful because it gives you tools. It gives you the tools to help you navigate what you're feeling, right? Because we all have feelings, we all have a full range of
Right.
emotions, and I thank God that on this side of things, while I miss them tremendously in the natural, I have tons of memories that ultimately, even if it starts out tearful, I'm laughing by the end of my thoughts about them. And honestly, like I think about them, and the
Right.
two of them were very much like, I could almost hear them like, why are you crying? Get up, go do something. Like, and so a lot of times, like, I'll have that thought at some point, and then it makes me laugh, and then I do something that honors them, right? So, like her birthday, Manushka's birthday just passed, and so I was like, you know what? Since we were kids, like our thing was going to get cheesecake because we both like cheesecake and balloons, and so I was like, I'm gonna eat some cheesecake in her honor today and talk to Chloe about her Tati Nunu, and so she called her Tati Mumu, but we're working on it. But I'm like, God is so faithful that and it's stages, and you're always going to miss that person in the natural because I think there's some
Mhm.
misconception that you get over it, and those are things that I would never you
Mm-mm.
don't ever get over missing a loved one, right? But I will say that you
Mm-mm.
can grow
No.
through the grief, right? And there's still some
Yeah.
measure of grief, I guess, but
And
yeah,
it's okay.
yes, yeah,
It's okay. It's okay to miss your loved one that's
for
no
sure.
longer here. It's okay to, occasionally wish, I wish I could send them
Yeah.
this message or I wish
Yes.
I could call them, you know, especially when you're getting like good news or, you're at a joyous event and you wish that they were there. It's okay to have those moments where your heart kind of aches a little bit and says, "Oh, I wish they were here to
Yeah.
witness." It's okay. Don't let anybody tell you that it's not okay or you should be
Yeah.
over it by then. However, there is a difference in moving through grief stages because there are levels to grief, okay? There are depths to grief. But there is a difference between moving through those different depths and levels and staying at the very lowest level of grief, where that does turn into depression, where that does turn into loneliness and a whole bunch of other things where you're no longer able to
Yeah.
function, where essentially sometimes, when people go through those really heavy levels of grief, it's almost like they hopped in the
No,
coffin as
because it's
well.
true. A lot of times that is what happens, right? Yeah, in the natural, you're still here, but how many times have you spoken to someone, and I know I have for sure, who have lost someone, and it's like every time they talk about it, it's like the moment it happened. And that my heart breaks for
Yeah,
people like that and who are in that situation. And I'm not talking about somebody who this just
absolutely.
happened last month or last week. I'm talking about someone who's
Oh, no.
good and far down the line, right? Like you were saying, if you're still at that very
Right.
first stage of grief, it might be time to get a little help if you haven't. But also even
It
with the
might be
help, it's the
time to
being the
get some help.
receptive. You have to be receptive to the help, right? Like you can get the help or you can sit in a session, but
Yeah,
if you're not willing to say, okay, I'm releasing this, right? You're not releasing the person, but you're releasing the
right.
burden of grief because it will most certainly be like
Absolutely.
a heavy, wet, weighted blanket, and it can ultimately snuff out the rest of your life, right? And I'm sure your loved one would not want that,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
that's one of the things that I was like,
No.
okay, this person's gone, but I have to keep living, right? I think about in Manushka's case, her kids. I'm like, I'm like, I couldn't imagine, you're shutting down and now I'm not accessible to them for anything that they could potentially need, right? Because her spirit lives on.
Yeah. They lost their
Yeah,
mom.
I'm
Yeah.
like, our spirit lives on when we talk about the good times and even when you talk about difficult stuff. But it's like keeping the memories alive because the memories are what'll last us until we see them again, God willing, right? And well, for us, we'll see them again.
Absolutely.
But you know, yeah,
Amen.
yeah,
If and, like, as I mentioned about not staying in the deepest level of grief, it kinda brings back to me, the end of, 2020, my grandmother passed, and that was the probably the biggest my maternal grandmother passed. The biggest, blow to me in terms of, losing a loved one. My paternal grandmother, she had passed back in 2015, but I wasn't as close to her as I was to my maternal grandmother. And I think the part of it that probably, hurt the most, not that anybody anticipates losing a loved one, but, my grandmother, she had, you know, gotten sick and it just progressed quite rapidly. And, as Christians, we have faith. Listen, I'm a Christian and I have faith in miracles,
absolutely.
modern day miracles. Jesus didn't just heal the sick and raise the dead back in Bible days. I believe he still does that now. So with that faith, I had full assurance that God was
Yeah,
going to heal
because
my
why not?
grandmother. She's not going anywhere. She's
Oh,
she's
yes.
full of life. What do
Yeah.
you mean? She's going to be here another
I know
20
that's right.
plus years. That's
Yes,
how I
yeah.
felt, right? And then that day came. It was literally the last day of 2020. And to find out that she didn't make it, and we were literally like heading to go see her, and I was about 15 minutes away from her house and she had passed. It was literally like somebody had punched me in the gut. I had never experienced that level of hurt, that I wasn't able to talk to her again or see her again. And it literally just consumed my thoughts day in, day not day in and
Yeah.
day out. Um, I was dreaming about her. It literally just it really knocked the wind out of me. And even going into, 2021, it was like I was just waking
Yeah.
up and just going through the motions. Like I wasn't really, fully operating as my true self. Yeah, I would go out, put a smile on, but the minute someone asked me, "How you doing?" It was like right. It was almost like I could barely hold
No,
back
let me
any
tell you, I understand. It
tears.
is it is awful, and you finish up, and then I add to it at the end. But
And I remember during that time, I could barely like go out and even look people in the eye in the street because I was in such this depth of grief and sadness. And that level of grief, I believe is natural, especially for someone that you love and you love deeply.
yeah,
However, when I felt like that level wasn't
yeah,
lifting, that it was just this heaviness that was sitting on me to the point where I felt like I wasn't myself. I was like not eating, I wasn't taking good care of myself, wasn't making good decisions. Um I would just spend a lot of time crying. It was a very hard season and I wasn't coming out of that. Um that's when I knew that it was morphing into
yeah,
something else. And I feel like in those seasons where you're going through this pain, the enemy likes to
for
take
sure.
advantage of
Yeah,
it. And he'll say, "Oh, okay, she's down. She's preoccupied with what she's feeling right now. Okay,
yeah,
let's send this." And all of a sudden that grief started turning into depression. It started turning into um me accusing myself of just, "Oh, you didn't spend enough time with her. Shame on you. You should have called her more. You should have been there because, I live 2,500
hmm,
miles away from, the rest of my family." And it was like, "You shouldn't have never moved, you should have spent more time with her." And it was like a record playing in my mind that just kept
hmm,
repeating, and I kept blaming myself for wasting time. "Oh, you shoulda, you shoulda, you shoulda, you shoulda." And then because of that happening, it became like this depression, like, "Oh, I really messed this up." And then it turned into fear of me losing my other loved ones. So then I was like, "I'm running out of time. I
yeah,
need to be around them. I'm running out of time," because I was afraid of feeling that grief
yeah,
again. And so I'm going through all this turmoil, and, you know, we're gonna bring this up later, how important it is to have community around you. But even, with the community that I had, I didn't necessarily wanna reach out to my family because I knew they were going through their own grief
yeah,
process, and I didn't wanna, put an extra burden on them. So, to have to process these things, you know, essentially by yourself, that was the hardest thing, and that's when I was like, this is going on, like, this heaviness is going on too long, and I'm praying, and I'm not, really seeing
yeah,
much breakthrough, and I'm like, let's check out another option as well
for
as
sure.
staying in prayer, staying encouraged in the word." And I went
Hello.
to a therapist who specialized
Yeah.
in grief, and we worked through it. We worked through it. She validated my emotions, my feelings. There was several sessions I just sat there and cried, and she allowed me because she said, "This is what you have to do to
Mhm,
work through
mhm.
it." And I tell you, that thing, it was like it started lifting, and then, she gave me great resources. There was one book, it's called The Grief Recovery
Yes.
Handbook, and it's by, John, W. James and Russell Friedman, and there's another grief it's called a grief handbook, and that as well is a great resource. I'll make sure to drop the link in the descriptions below. So you guys, if you're going through a hard time with grief, it definitely helps with walking you through like the different stages, and just having a resource to kind of help you through each day. And you know, I definitely still miss my grandmother, but there was a point where I couldn't even speak about her. I couldn't even
Yeah.
look at a picture without busting into tears and sadness. And now, more so, my memory of her, and whenever I think of her, is not
Yeah.
accusatory. It's not, "Oh,
Thank
you should have
God.
been there." It's more so, "Oh, I remember when we did this. It was so much fun." Or even in, times where I wish she was around, I'm like, "Oh, she would
Yeah.
have enjoyed this," instead of saying, "Oh my gosh, why
Yeah.
isn't she here?" It totally changed the framework of my thinking, which helped me to rise up out of that, the lowest depth of grief. And I think that's very important that, especially if you're going through a hard time of grief, that you you acknowledge where you are. You acknowledge how long you've been there. Because if you feel like you've been in this heavy area of grief for a long time, you got to check
Yes.
in with
Yes. Yes.
yourself and and reach out for resources and help. You don't have to do
Yeah.
it alone.
That is
You don't.
wonderful. And that's beautiful too, because I remember obviously when this happened, and I was concerned about the kid, because I will I will add to this, right? When you have the type of grandmothers that we had, right? It's your heart is literally intertwined with theirs. We had
Mhm.
the most wonderful grandmother, and we pretty much saying we grew up with her like from birth, because we were, well, it's a fun fact about me, born at home. And so we literally, grandma saw us day one. Right. And this was our paternal grandmother, and she was just the sweetest woman. Oh my goodness. She just, we loved everything about her. She was so much fun. She was so good to us. She loved the Lord. It's just like they don't make them like that anymore. And I will never forget, it was a similar situation. I remember I was talking to her and she was on the phone. Everything was going good. She's all. And then the next call, I guess she's going to the hospital. And I'm like, excuse me. And then it was just a quick decline. And I was like, when I tell you, just listening to what you were saying about the lies the enemy was telling you, when I tell you that he was
Mhm.
telling me the exact same lies, because I was 24
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
And, it was like, oh, well, he brought up literally every time that I didn't go over there, and I began to like beat myself up. Oh man, I wish I
Yeah.
had have, woulda, coulda, shoulda. Meanwhile, the times that we were there wasn't anything my grandmother could ask me to do that I wouldn't have done. So it was just false. Like everything was false.
Right.
But in those moments, it feels so real, and you
Yeah.
feel like such a panic, and you're like, I wish I could have. And because it's
Mhm.
finite, like you cannot take those moments back that you didn't come. And I was thinking about all the time that I was being
No.
a kid and just hanging out with my friends, and I'm like, she wouldn't have wanted, when I came to myself, I'm like, she would have wanted me to do just what I did. She knew that she was loved, right? She loved us the same. And I was just thankful to God that the Holy Spirit, because I was going through it, and I was like, she was literally like declining by my birthday. And I was like, Lord, please don't let her die on my birthday, because I ain't got the time. I feel like it would just set me back a trillion years. Like I don't want that memory on my birthday. And I will tell you that God is so gracious. That night we had went out for my birthday, and I remember I was at Michelle's house, at the Green's house, and my grandmother passed like minutes after midnight. And thank God I was in the company of people who love me, and got up the next day and went home. But I will never forget that,
Mhm.
at some point while I was just kind of pouring my heart out before the Lord about just missing my grandma, because I was like, this can't be. And then he was just like, "Oh, how long you want to live?" Because my grandmother would have been 91 or 90 in June of that year. And I was like, Lord, I was like, forgive me, because this is actually high key nuts. Like, the woman has outlived a husband, husband, children,
Mhm.
and I was like, and stuff that I'm sure she never even spoke about. And I was like, Lord, the woman deserves some
Yeah.
rest, okay? Because if you had to ask me, she'd have been there another 90,
Okay.
okay? And I was just like, Lord. And I felt a release, because obviously I knew where she was going. Even passing on, my grandmother was singing hymns,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm like, I know where she's going. I miss that lady,
Yeah.
and obviously, just like you said, when those wonderful things come up,
Absolutely.
you're like, she would love to see this. And sometimes I remember even during wedding
Uh-huh.
stuff, I was just talking to her. I was like, okay, like, I know you would love this dress, or I know you would really love this, or I know you would love to see Paul, and I know you would love Chloe. And, like, if you could see the family, you know,
Mhm.
but we thank God. All right. And another thing
Yeah.
I wanted to say was, while we're talking about losing someone, another aspect, I'll just pivot a bit, is grieving
Yeah.
situations or seasons, right? You had brought that up initially to talk about, and I can bringing
Yeah.
up wedding stuff. That's kind of a good segue into this, because we got married. Well, we got
Mhm.
engaged right in at the beginning of COVID. Then everything shut down, so it was just like a very weird time, right? Like, and then
Yeah.
thank God everything opened up. We went on to have the wedding and this stuff, and everything was wonderful. And then I found out I was pregnant with Chloe. And so I had already wrapped my mind around being a wife. So it wasn't, honestly, I was ready for that transition, right? No big. But that
Mhm.
addition of a young one, that addition of a child hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like very excited, but then it was kind of like maybe like month 4 or 5, I was kind of like working though, so working at the shop or whatever, and then it dawned on me, like, this thing that I love to do and can freely do now, right? Because me, I be in that thing all day long, okay, all
Mhm.
night long. I get to just, I love working at the shop. I love doing hair. I love doing makeup. I love that. And then it hit me like, the freedom that you have is gonna change drastically.
It's gonna
And that
change.
it was very
Yeah.
sobering, because for a long time it was just myself I had to worry about, right? Get up, do this, do that, do this, do that. And I brought it up to Paul, and I was like, I'm grieving the loss of my former life. My former life, like I mentioned, as a single
Yeah.
person, as a married person, even, who could still rip and run as I choose, right? Um, but now this is different. And, I was like,
Yeah.
thinking to myself, I was like, man, I don't want him to think like I'm not happy. And then it kind of, like, I think a lot. And I was kind of in my thoughts, and I was like, you know what? You can have two things can be true at once. I can be grieving who I
Yes.
was, and the situations and the things that were previous, while I'm very excited for this next phase of life. And I think
Very.
more times we need to start
Yeah.
talking about that more, because people harbor those things to themselves, and they think I'm a
Yeah.
bad person because I'm thinking this, or because I feel this way. You're not. It's a natural progression of life, right?
Right.
You're grieving the former now. I mean, if you're getting too deep in that grief, and then it's like, oh, now I'm feeling trapped, you really might need to flesh some things out, because maybe you weren't ready, right? Like, and that's okay.
Right.
But I wasn't having those feelings. I was having the feeling of, wow, I really had a
Yeah.
great run with this. And so let's be for real. I was 37, right? Like, I had a fantastic run. Okay. And so
Okay.
obviously, I was just like, well, it will just pivot. It will just change, right? And so just accepting that this is changing and things are moving forward, but this is the former. And, by the time,
Yeah.
it didn't take me long to get beyond that. But I just coming to that realization and accepting, like, this is what once was, right? And now this is what is, and I'm
Mhm.
excited and I'm happy about this. But being honest about feeling that grief, and sometimes it lasts longer. I'm one of the people, I just kind of go through things quickly, right? Because I don't want to linger longer
Mhm.
than I need to, because it can, it very
Mm-mm.
easy.
Right.
It's a quick switch, right? Where it goes from grieving something to now you're down and out for real. And so, I thank God for that. And then I'm thankful that I'm able to express that to my friends, to my family, to my husband, you
Mhm.
know, and this is life. And so, like you said, missed opportunities, grieving
Right.
opportunities, grieving.
Yeah. And you hit on something, when you said about when you talked about accepting what
Yeah.
is, versus staying in what was. And that applies to even when you're grieving
Yes. Yeah.
a friendship change or a relationship change. Um, Part of it and part of even my process, I went through a friendship change, um, where, I had grieved a friendship. I had been friends with someone for
Yeah.
almost 8 years, and then we grew apart and couldn't understand it. So I did go through a grieving process, and part of it was, and, you know, thanks to my therapist as well, she helped me understand it's okay to release what
Yes.
was.
Yes.
It's okay to release it because, part I think the thing that kinda pushes forth you staying in this place of grief is rehearsing what
Yeah.
was, rehearsing the memories over and over in your mind, and now you're at a place where you can't control it. You can't go back and bring what was into the current because it's no
Yeah.
longer the same. And so it's only when you come into that place of acceptance that we had a great time, it was a great run, this is what it
Yes.
is now. Life goes
Yes.
on. Life gets better. There are other people in this world that are gonna bring the same amount of joy,
Yeah.
if not more. It's okay. Honor that time, that season, and, to realize that it's been said so many times that God sends people for a season, a reason,
Yes.
or a
Yes.
lifetime. And honoring that, "Okay, yeah, I thought this person might have been in my life for a lifetime, but they were actually only there for a season." And I just honor that
Yeah.
season.
You not to cut you off if you were gonna say anything before you finish.
No, 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 no.
Friendship grief though, listen,
Oh, that hit
friendship
different
grief,
though.
especially
Ye
let me be clear because there's people who have like a ton of friends, right? And like so everybody's just their friend. But then there's people who are like like
The close friends, right, that inner.
people like you and
Mhm.
me who like you value your friendships.
Yeah,
These friendships are really more
yeah,
family ship than they are just like a person that you met. It's like,
yeah,
like you're all in.
yeah,
When you are truly all in with
yeah,
someone and that relationship changes for whatever the reason is, that
yeah,
thing
yeah,
feels like death. Right. And quite frankly, it is
yeah.
the death of
It does.
maybe this phase in relationship, right? Because but it
Yeah.
hurts. That thing is not fun. You but like you said,
Mhm.
honoring that, I think
Mhm.
once once you can say, "You know what? I don't like where we're at, but I'm that doesn't negate the times that we had together that were wonderful, that were great." And
Right.
who knows why these things happen, right? Sometimes it's clear cut, other times not so much.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But you just like you say, you honor it, you honor the person, you wish them well, and you ask God to bring you
Yeah.
good
I
new
think
or good ones.
probably
Mhm.
part of the reason, right, I think part of the reason they are, maybe, I don't know which one is more painful, but I think part of the reason is because, when you, like, lose a loved
Yeah.
one to death, it's final. There's, like, a finality to that. Whereas when you just lose a
Mhm.
friendship, that person is still technically alive, and for me, I'm gonna speak for me because everyone's,
Yeah.
situation is, there was always that little
Uh-huh.
bit of hope that things would come back together and then it would go back to normal, that this was just, oh, like a
Yeah.
spat. And it wasn't until I stopped searching
You
for
gotta give yourself the
closure
closure.
and I stopped searching. Right. I stopped searching for closure, I stopped searching for, oh, it's gonna come back. When I released that, and like I said before, I honored
Yeah.
what was and literally started living in
So I
what
need to
is
get like
now.
you
That's
because I don't
when
be having no glimmer of
listen,
hope. When I tell you, and I think love it just sounds crazy, but I think I know that you know me. So I think once
I think it depends on the
once
situation. I'm
listen.
talking
No, listen to what I'm
on
saying.
my situation where there was
And
so many
no, I'm saying
questions,
I
right.
like I understand it, and I'm saying that I really think it is normal for people to have that glimmer of hope. I think I'm abnormal, is what I'm saying for
Yeah,
sure. Because and this is why I was saying why I think I'm abnormal. It's like I don't be having spats with my friends. I, you know what I'm saying? Like, do we agree on everything?
yeah.
No, but it's never like I don't think I've ever had a season of time where I just was like, I'm not talking to you because like it's like honestly for me like what people that I like am like that with what could be so serious.
But sometimes it doesn't even look like that. It looks like you just stopped talking to each other.
Uh, I mean, I don't know if that's ever happened to me because even if I don't speak to you guys,
Or it did no, or it could be like even one person is harboring
uh-huh,
some type of resentment
yeah,
over time, and it brings like a distance, or even when you're in the same room with a friend, you could feel that tension within yourself knowing that
hmm
something is off here, something's not right. And then if you allow that to linger for too long without addressing it, yeah, it could totally
hmm
separate your friendship to a point where it doesn't look like
yeah,
what it once was. Now it's totally different because you've people have grown and during that time, and also you
yeah.
just don't feel the same. You don't feel the same. So it can happen that way. Or it could just be like a straight sever where you just you don't speak anymore. And because you're not speaking, you're not communicating, uh your emotions, and even probably the enemy starts to speak these
Yeah,
little things in your head and see that person never
yeah.
cared about you. They were never your friend. And then you
You like
start
you
building
like
this whole
you
story
show
in your
right because I
mind.
remember that time 10 years
Right.
ago. You were like, baby, what did you want to
Uh-huh.
talk about?
Right. So now you don't just have grief that you're going through. Now you're
Yeah,
working through
yes,
bitterness and anger. So you
yeah.
see how that thing kind of
Oh,
opens the door
for
for a
sure.
lot of other things. Now you're kind of operating in a level of unforgiveness because now you're like trying to go back to
Right.
1992 when that person didn't give you
Right.
$5
They
that you
never
asked
cared about
for,
me,
you
you're like,
know,
"Child,
to hold. See, they never cared about me, and now you're
hello."
snowballing.
Yes, yeah.
So, okay, so it's important to definitely whenever those things arise, whether it's the loss of a friend or a relationship, is to, yes, allow yourself to grieve and acknowledge that you're
Yeah.
grieving this. It's okay. It's okay to say, "Oh, I miss this person," or "I missed the friendship that we once had." But you also have to honor what was and acknowledge
I
what
hope y'all
is.
getting that because she has mentioned that multiple times, and it's for a reason, right? And so also, y'all, I know Jolene had held up the 2 books well, she held up the 1 book and then mentioned the other. And so we were talking about them as it relates to grieving a loved one, but also I think it's a
Yeah,
great
this is
tool
also
just
for
period. So Imma
relationships.
tell y'all,
Yep.
we don't have no connection to these
Mhm.
people in these books.
For health,
Yeah, because you know what? You
all
can
good.
grieve your good
Nope.
health. You know what, y'all? Go on and get that book because I'm gonna
Mhm.
get it. I don't have it, but I'm going to get it. Um, and I
Yeah,
think,
it's good.
providing people with tools is something where we're good for equipping people. But this is an important part of life. And everybody's at different stations in life, but the earlier you get a hold of these things, and even if earlier is now, it's not too late to move
Yeah.
forward well. And I think that that is so
Yeah.
important. I know I feel better when I'm able to have the tools to, say, okay, I'm feeling like this today. You give yourself that space to feel what you're feeling. And then you say, okay, now it's time for me to rise up
Right.
out of these ashes and do what I know I need to do. Yeah,
And
yeah,
move
to move
on,
forward.
yeah.
Yep.
It's very important, and, we can give you all the resources, but the best resource is
Hello.
always the word of
Yes, yes.
God. And, especially relating to when you're going through these seasons of grief, know that God is with you. He has not turned his back on you. Any death or, a breakup of a friendship or a relationship did not come by
Mhm.
surprise to
Yeah.
him. In fact, I feel like many times he works through those situations, as
Yeah.
painful as they are. There is beauty in the
Listen,
ashes.
that's
There's
that's for
beauty.
sure, right? And I think now's actually a really good time to slip in a Bible story, right? A Bible lesson. And I feel like Job actually lines up exactly with what you're talking about. Because if y'all don't know the
Ooh,
story of Job,
okay.
and I mean,
The man
that
went
man
through,
had notable suffering
and he
through
served the
through it all,
Lord. Okay? And
through it
he
all.
served
Even
the
when people were
Lord.
telling him, "You need to curse God and go on and die." Like, listen, hold on. Do we need to give the scripture about Job? Let's give that. I'll give it. I'm gonna tell y'all actually just go on and read the book of Job. Don't even play around with it. Go on and read
Just go
the
ahead
whole
and
thing.
read it.
It is
Read it.
you go
Yeah.
through the ups and downs with him. When you're reading it, you really begin to understand. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think that people think or people make comments about God and why would he allow this? That's people's go-to when they don't understand. So why would he allow suffering? Why would he allow this? And I say that like we typically say on here, that the Bible is basic instructions before leaving earth. It's the rule book, right? And I believe that God has those
Yeah.
stories in place
Mm,
so we can understand for sure that he understood suffering, right? Like there was even the story of what Jesus
yeah.
and Lazarus, that was his friend, right? And he mourned his friend.
Yeah.
He
Jesus
mourned
wept.
his friend.
Okay.
So, he was,
Jesus
yes, fully
wept.
God, fully man, but he also understood. He went through every range of emotion, right? And so he
Yeah.
can identify even more
Yeah.
with us, right? In our suffering.
Mhm.
And so, I mean,
Absolutely.
it's a beautiful thing about the Bible. We don't have to like these things, but
Yeah.
there are definitely uh
It is. It's part of the life cycle. I believe it's in Ecclesiastes. There is a time to dance, a time to reap, sow, and there's also a time
yeah,
to
time to
grieve and
mourn.
for death. So it is just, time. It just makes sense that, the Bible would address these things. Even in Psalms, it says that the Lord is close to the
Yes,
brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. So he's close to you. Even if this is a time where you're going through any level of grief, know that the Lord is close to you. He's with you. You are not alone. You're not going through this alone at all. He he's close to you, and he's here to lift those burdens and lift that weight and give you peace that
yes,
passes all understanding, as you mentioned earlier. If you ask
yes.
him, he will.
Yes.
He will
You
do
know,
it.
when you
He
said
will
something
do
and it
it.
reminded me of something I heard years ago, and it was that God is closer to you than your next breath even. And when you really sit and think about
Mm,
that, that's something to be said. Because sometimes you do feel, oh, nobody
yeah,
understands. It doesn't matter if anyone in the natural understands, even though I'm sure that there's someone who does. But God is there and he fully understands, right? He's wired us all. He's made us all the way we
yeah,
are. So he for sure knows how we feel. But we can also cast our cares on
absolutely.
him. We can rest in him. And so that is the beauty of this thing.
Yeah. So we tried to make this as light as possible. My voice got a little
Oh,
crackly, but
it's
it's
all
all
good,
good.
G. Oh my goodness.
But we wanted to make sure that we address this because it is a very important
Yeah.
aspect of life. Prayerfully, you haven't had to endure many seasons of grief, but definitely if you're going through grief now, or you might see this in the future, just know that God is with you, and that it's okay to grieve, but
Yeah.
don't stay there. Don't stay there. Don't stay there. So we hope that we brought you some
Yeah.
light and some salt.
Sprinkle, sprinkle.
And for sprinkle.
No, abort mission.
Sprinkle.
Oh, see, there go your laugh for the day.
But if you haven't already, please hop down in the comments and let us know if this connected with you in any way. If you have any tips or any scriptures that may encourage someone who is going through a season of grief, please leave them down there in the comments as well. And as always, if you haven't already,
subscribe,
like, and share our podcast with everybody. Why not everybody? But you never know, actually. You never know who's actually going through a quiet season of grief.
That's real,
so
too.
Just go ahead and share it.
So if you feel impressed, share it.
Yeah.
I think that's good.
Absolutely. So we thank you once again for joining us for another episode of Salt
Lightheartedness.
And we hope that you have enjoyed this episode, and we hopefully will see you for our next episode. So, bye.